Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. This is a weekly podcast where I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down and chat with people all across the DMsGuild space. And I'm overjoyed to be joined by Cassandra MacDonald this week. Hello.
Hello, Matthew.
Thank you very much for joining me. Again, sorry, I've started noticing that I'm doing this thing where as I introduce the podcast, I realize that I say it in the same cadence every time. And that's now starting to amuse me. That it hasn't changed. I feel like if you know there's those videos where they take someone saying something random like 50 times over, and then they make it so they have one word they say at the exact same time. I want to try and put one of those together. But no, ignoring my nonsense.
That's what happens when you do editing. You start to notice these things.
Yeah, it's literally it's coming up to, what is it? So yeah, this is like the coming up to a year of doing these.
Oh damn.
Yeah, it's crazy. But first and foremost, let's talk about less about me slowly losing my mind via podcast, and more about you and your creative process. So I guess kind of for the people listening, what sort of products might they know you for?
Well, my first and by far my most well-known product was Skullport, Shadow of Waterdeep. That was the one that I think I'm most known for. Recently, I dropped Tasha's Hideous Leftovers, which has picked up a fair amount of steam, and I think the inclusion of eggs has somehow become the marketing pitch on that. So I hope my brand doesn't become Monster Eggs, but these things, we don't all control these things.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's especially with like viral marketing. Sometimes people just latch onto random ideas. I think it's the same with the Rime of the Frost Maiden had like heavy goat themes. But no, awesome. And so I guess kind of what's I'd love to kind of chat about both, but kind of immediately, Skullport Shadow of Waterdeep is a chunky product. And particularly for like a first release, or your first foray into the DMsGuild, I'm kind of curious, like what was particularly like the inspiration behind it? Was it
Well, originally, I've been playing with the same group for a couple of years now, and they have a fair amount of faith in my weird ideas. Like if I say I want to do this thing, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about, and what are you doing?" But I'm in. And my most recent weird thing I convinced them on was trying out Dungeon of the Mad Mage, because I'd played Undermountain as a kid. And I loved it. I loved the weird and wacky funhouse dungeon feel.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring that back. I wanted to give them Undermountain. And they wanted to play pirates.
Okay.
Yeah, the first thing that somebody came to me with was, she was like, "Hey, I have this great idea for a pirate character, but I'm not really sure how to fit that into Undermountain." And my brain immediately went off because I'd already been reading about Skullport in there, and I was like, "Don't worry, I got you." But I cracked into the book and started reading on Skullport, and I don't know if you've ever been through Dungeon of the Mad Mage, but
I mean, I've read it, but no, I haven't had there's a lot of dungeon to dig into there.
Oh yeah, no, it's massive. It's a ridiculous book, but I won't get into that.
Yeah.
But in the back, Skullport is pretty much after everything else. Like it's just sort of slipped in as an appendix, and it's maybe 10, 12 pages at most, not even that. And it's super bare bones, doesn't really elaborate much. It's just like, here you go. This is a place where characters can restock their supplies before going further into the dungeon. And I was like, well, that ain't gonna fly, because I promised my players pirate adventures. So I started researching. I went back to the old books. And I basically just kept reading and reading until I felt confident I could run an adventure set in Skullport.
Oh, wow.
And by the time I was done, I had something like 30, 40, maybe 50 pages worth of notes. And I'm looking back, and this is a book.
Yeah.
And
I was gonna say, I just, as you were saying, about 40 pages of notes. I previously glanced off over to the page count of Skullport, where it's at 86. So the 40 pages of notes doubled as as the journey went along, which I think is, I think that's part of the course, really.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating. Again, I love hearing the sort of tales of like, going out your way to kind of facilitate fun for your player and your table, and that kind of lends itself to saying, I could give this like a little bit of polish, and next thing you know, it's
exactly.
I guess I'm kind of curious then. So like, was it easy in researching like Skullport? Like, was there a lot out there, or was it like, did you have to go deep in the archives, like bust out like the torch and like cobwebs?
I was definitely in torch and cobwebs territory. It was not easy. There is a lot of lore about Skullport. It is all over the place, and it doesn't all make sense because it was just something that was put in Undermountain as basically just an offhand idea.
Yeah.
The writer was like, hey, maybe we could put a town in there, and they just went with it. So there's a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense, like why is it's below sea level, but the waters flow out to the sea. It's absolute nonsense. And there's a lot of conflicting lore to parse out, and there's one map from 4th edition that I think I still get angry every time I see it because it's so in conflict with the rest of the lore.
Yeah.
That it put me down a rabbit hole of trying to figure out what was up with it for about 2 weeks before I just had to accept that it was a whole different thing.
I must admit that is kind of fascinating. You kind of hear about how things gradually change over the sort of editions, and I imagine that for just as many things that kind of keeps the essence and theme, there are probably just as many locations that over time kind of get shifted and warped until they're not quite the same thing anymore.
Definitely.
This is, I guess it's like this. How deep is Skullport compared to what is it like? Is it like 10 levels deep, or is it like really quite far down there?
It's 3 levels deep.
Okay, fair. That's reasonable.
Yeah, it's close enough to Waterdeep that you can still use Waterdeep in a Skullport adventure.
See, I must admit, my interpretation of Skullport was always very much like it almost is like the like Shadow Veil version of Waterdeep, or like evil Waterdeep.
Yeah. That's basically it. It is the grim reflection.
Fair. No, it's interesting, and it's kind of to have them in kind of within close proximity to one another. You would think like all the magisters of Waterdeep would be like, we probably should go deal with the evil city that is just beneath us, but we can their piracy brings in a good amount of trade every now and then. So I guess.
Well, what happens if you root out all the criminals under Waterdeep? Where do they go?
Yeah, they were in the cosmopolitan city, as you know it. No, I'm curious, and I guess this is, in researching like all about Skullport, were there any sort of like really standout pieces of lore, or like what kind of like what did you gravitate towards for something that is like this is actually like really, really cool?
The thing that jumped out to me immediately, and I think there were a couple of items, but ultimately one that actually ended up being rather pivotal in Shadow of Waterdeep was the Rag Mage. Because he's kind of this under explored character in the original 2nd edition Skullport book. Just kind of there, like there's implications of what it might be and what his role in Skullport was and all the mythology that's built up around him, but he's not really a crucial character. And I felt like there was just this inherent intrigue in a character called the Rag Mage being a boogeyman of one of the worst places in the world. Like, people have all these myths and ideas about what brings him forth and why he's scary to all these scary people.
Yeah.
And I think that just drew me in, and why I decided to do the adventure in Shadow of Waterdeep is all centered around the Rag Mage.
I mean,
because I just love it as a concept.
I think sometimes that is kind of a strength of some of the books being not as detailed as they could be, because obviously they could have had the chance to give the Rag Mage like an elaborate backstory, how they witnessed their parents dying outside a cinema late one night, or whatever it was. But just by being intentionally sort of cryptic, it kind of allows, again, creators like, us to kind of fill in the gaps or, run away with it. No, that is actually, that is like an interesting character. Is it kind of mentioned if they're like, if they have any sort of alignment, or are they just sort of like, do they have an agenda? Like, do they have an agenda, or are they just, the ragman, sorry.
Back in AD&D Skullport, I don't think their agenda was incredibly clear. I have to admit, I researched this a long time ago.
Oh yeah, no, of course.
But in Shadow of Waterdeep, I made their agenda more clear. I gave them more of a crisis to deal with, and made it obvious what they're there for.
Yeah. No, interesting. And then I guess like one of my other questions then is, so obviously Skullport Shadow of Waterdeep, you had the intention of kind of obviously fleshing it out via notes. And then you were like, well, it'd be nice to kind of have an adventure to kind of go along with it. And then you were like, maybe some, subclasses kind of. I'm curious about like what was the growth of that project? Like, was it more the case of just as you were going, you were just like, oh, this would be a cool idea to throw in, or?
Yeah, that was kind of it. I wanted it to be a complete guide. I wanted somebody to be able to pick up the core 3 books and Shadow of Waterdeep and run an adventure without ever leaving Skullport. That was my goal.
Yeah.
And for that, it developed. Adding all the subclasses and the items and such were all just kind of a consequence of that. I wanted people to be able to build characters that fit into Skullport. And every single item I put in there, like all of the new weapons and such that I designed, was all just a consequence of why wouldn't Skullport have this? And why wouldn't this character have this? So I would just keep piling things on.
Interesting.
The thought to add subclasses in, I think, literally just developed while I was out on a walk and chatting with someone about the project. I was just like, oh, how cool would it be if we had a subclass for this thing that's common in Skullport, and a subclass for this, and it just sort of snowballed as it went.
The rest is kind of history, I suppose. No, interesting. And I think, again, it is kind of like those sort of, I guess, all-encompassing projects. They fit the niche. I mean, it is the case is like, again, rather than having, let's say, like 7 or so different PDFs to sort of dance between, having a sort of like full, complete, like, I guess, like I was about to call it a Bible. I don't know if that's, but it is the kind of equivalent of that. And I guess for your first release, were you kind of, I guess this is a bit of a weird question to ask, if like you were expecting the level of success it got?
My theory with Shadow of Waterdeep was that it would be an enthusiast product that a couple of people who wanted to play in Skullport would like. I thought I would sell maybe like a dozen or so copies. My biggest and most optimistic goal was to break the copper margin. Like, I wanted to break copper bestseller. And I dropped it and figured, like, the night of the release, I was stressed. I was like, oh God, what if nobody wants it at all?
Yep.
But at the same time, I was like, this was a hobby. Like, I did this for fun. And it was a passion project. I loved working on it. I loved releasing it. So I wasn't that upset if it didn't sell. And then I woke up like the next day and it had already broken copper. Like, it broke copper under 48 hours.
Wow.
And I just was sitting there like, what?
And actually, was it? If you don't mind me asking, like, what was the timing of this release? Was it fairly close to the release of Dungeon of the Mad Mage, or was it?
Oh no.
No.
It was, I think, a year and a half after Dungeon of the Mad Mage. That was part of it, as I didn't think many people would be playing Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Part of why I wanted to emphasize that it could be used independently, because Dungeon of the Mad Mage wasn't a super popular adventure to begin with.
Yeah, I must admit, I don't really. I must admit, again, so it's the case of I've read it, I haven't had the chance to sort of play through it, but it feels like, again, if dungeon crawling is your jam, I mean, it's hard to argue with the dungeons crammed into it.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, it's an awesome adventure. It's suffered from marketing, but that's that's beside the point.
Yeah, I think as well. I was like, it is curious when you sort of say, oh, the Waterdeep adventures, and then you have like, uh, uh, Dragon Heist, which is just this weird city-based caper, and then you have like Mad Mage, which is the other end of the spectrum. Like,
yeah, exactly.
And to pair them together, like I must admit, like if you were someone who was just like played through Dragon Heist, you're like, I love it. This adventure was like so freeing, and they're like, do you want to play part 2? And they're like, yeah, more of the same, please. And it's like you're in day 73 of a dungeon. You haven't seen daylight. The tavern you guys bought, you don't know like if it's still operating. You don't know.
Yeah, not the greatest dovetail.
No. But I suppose if you build a city atop of a mega dungeon, you kind of have to deal with it eventually.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I love Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It's definitely weird. It's definitely not something I would run for most groups.
Yeah. And so interesting. So especially, this was something that kind of obviously stemmed from your table and trying to tailor a particular experience to your group. Has that kind of been like a trend for like some of your own other projects and stuff, or has it been for the most part that was how you did that one, and then Tasha's Hideous Leftovers was more like, well, I have a lot of ideas.
Tasha's Hideous Leftovers was definitely a very different process compared to Shadow of Waterdeep. Some of my work does follow a similar form where I write something for my table and then figure out like, hey, this could probably work elsewhere. Like one of my adventures in Chilling Tales from the Whispering Wind was something I had run for my table before that I felt fit the form pretty well. But for the most part, my projects are more like, this is something I feel like the hobby could benefit from, or this is something that I feel like people would enjoy. Tasha's Hideous Leftovers was basically, I came up with the name as a joke, and Jeremy Forbing jumped me and was like, we have to do something with this. You can't just sit on a name like that.
Yeah.
So I ended up managing that project.
No, I must admit, I mean the sheer number of projects that kind of start as a joke. I think honestly, I feel like they should have their almost like their own category on the DMs Guild to be I made this joke as like 3 a.m. in a Discord somewhere, and now there is I've willed this thing into existence.
Yep.
Interesting. And I must admit, was it the like I said? So with I guess what I don't know if this is an appropriate parallel, but I imagine the timeline of Skullport from start to finish was significantly longer than the turnaround for Tasha's Hideous Leftovers.
Oh, absolutely. Tasha's, I think we crunched that out in maybe 2-3 months at most.
Jeez, that's
Shadow of Waterdeep was, I think I clocked it around 500 hours over the course of a year.
Yeah. I mean, again, the sheer sort of the size of the document, and 86 pages and everything. Yeah,
I'm also not a layout artist or a map maker. I also wasn't a tabletop designer.
I must admit, that's what I kind of love about like when it comes to like the people's first attempts, or their first sort of like putting together a product is you quickly kind of realize the many hats you have to wear. And you kind of like, I guess, like you always think, oh, I guess, everyone probably does everything themselves. So I'll just, I'll learn, I'll brute force, I'll learn layout. I guess I'll put some maps together. And then sort of over time, you're just like, oh yeah, no, I can sort of bring someone else in. Sorry, no, by means.
I was going to say, I've definitely moved toward delegating more. I do not want to ever do layout again. And there are far better cartographers than me.
Yeah. So I guess it's also, how did you like? Would you say like Tasha's Hideous Leftovers then was like your first attempt at sort of managing a project?
Yes, absolutely.
And I guess like how'd you find the process?
I hated it. No, not entirely. I had wanted to try project management as it was, because I'd done well as sort of like a co-manager, like helping organize people, helping get people working, and helping to lead projects. With Tasha's Hideous Leftovers, I went headfirst into exactly how difficult project management could be. and quickly discovered that the answer is very.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to keep everybody on track and organized and making sure we release on time, setting deadlines and keeping everyone to them, reviewing everyone's work to make sure that I'm on track and like keeping to the vision.
Mm-hmm.
It was a ton of work and not something that I am especially proficient with.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely a great time. Like I loved working on it. I loved the team I was working with. All excellent designers. Just a fantastic crew to be working with. It was just very much my first time project managing, and everyone else I was working with was probably a couple years in the industry. Meanwhile, I dropped my first product like 6 months ago, and I'm just like, I should not be telling you what to do. Like,
Yeah.
I am in no position to tell y'all what to do. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I had to hide that and make sure that I seemed like I knew what I was doing.
No, yeah, the sort of like you're outside the office door going, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Stepping into the meeting room, you're just like stone faced.
Exactly.
No, no, I think especially like trying to time like a release, like again, you had it like if not on the release day of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the day after, I think it was pretty much on.
Day before, I believe.
Day before, wow, you should nothing better. Like to be able to release it before the. But yeah, it's again those sort of like time restraints are challenging. Particularly again because it's like you're trying to get everything together, and particularly with a product that has, I guess. Again, it's a little bit of everything, you know. It's trying to bring it all together and kind of present it all. I imagine was particularly challenging. But
yeah. Sorry.
Well, so no. One of the things I was going to say is just about in terms of like leading a project and stuff like that. Is I don't think anyone ever necessarily feels like they're ready for it. And the people who say they are, I don't believe them, or I think, or you know, that I envy the way they have their whole life together that they can.
Fair enough.
No, but it was no, and so I guess stemming from that, what would like if you could summarize like what is one particular point that you would take away from Tasha's Hideous Leftovers that you would take on to like another sort of project that you kind of manage?
You should definitely make sure to set aside a 5% share for project management because it's a lot more work than you think. I didn't set aside a share for project management, and looking back, I probably should have because I did way more work on that than I usually do on other projects.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how all that admin adds up.
Yeah. Aside from that, I definitely needed to direct people more. I think because I was so unsure of my ability to do it, I was very absent from the project at times. And I think going to another project, I want to be, if I ever manage again, I do want to be more present and like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is our timeline.
Yeah.
Let's go. Like, keep this up, continuing. Instead of, I was very present in the beginning and very present around the launch, but a little more wishy-washy in the middle. And I wish I'd been more active all the way through.
Yeah, I think that's kind of fair because I imagine as well, obviously during the middle, you're going away and on top of like managing stuff out, you're handling your own contributions at the same time.
Yeah.
It is that weird sort of thing where like it's rare that you're a project manager and that is your sole role. You're also like again a designer and a contributor as well. So you've got your own sort of plates to kind of spin at the same time.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if this is a bit of a weird tangent, but one of the things that I'm kind of discovering now that as I sort of get involved with more collaborations and run to my own ones is I am kind of, I guess, not necessarily struggling, but because again, it's now getting to the stage where thankfully a lot of the people I'm working with are my friends, which is again, it's a privilege and like a fantastic position to be in. But I feel like it's kind of shaping my priorities a little bit where again, the end of the day, I want to kind of remain friends with everyone. I don't want to be, one particular project to be the project that broke our friendship. So it's again, I don't know if this is just me venting, but it's kind of curious as you kind of go along. And again, I guess one of the things kind of prompted me in reaching out to kind of have this chat is I've noticed again we've been kind of appearing like within the same sort of similar spaces.
Sure have.
And that's kind of how it goes. Like you keep bumping into people in like this, the same few groups of like collaborators, and then just like, oh yeah, no, let's try and keep, I guess, manage the line between this is a hobby. But again, as you kind of mentioned, like there's some people who are like, oh well, they're a good number of years into this, and they're more professional than they are hobbyists. And then you get like a ragtag group that are kind of a bunch of people in the middle, and it's like, how do I fairly juggle this?
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, yeah, I think that again, thank you for indulging me. Again, I don't want this to turn into an hour of what could be construed as therapy. But I guess to kind of turn it around then and to move a little bit away from project management and more to, again, you and your creative process then. With Skullport, obviously you had like a distinct place that obviously your players kind of came to you with like, they kind of wanted to do a little bit of Dungeons and Mad Mage and have the sort of pirates at its core. But for some of your other ideas, is there like a particular place where your ideas come from? Is it?
A lot of the time it is from the games I run. Particularly with 5e, a lot of the times it comes from trying to figure out how I can make what is not typically 5e work like 5e. That's not a great explanation, but Skullport was very much in the vein of like, can we do this sort of personal horror and political drama in 5e, a system which is at its heart about killing monsters, monsters and getting loot.
Yeah.
I'm always interested to kind of push the boundaries of what we can do with 5e. And every now and then when I'm running, I hit up against something that 5e just doesn't do well, and I hit a brick wall and get frustrated. And I'm like, I bet I could fix this. I bet I could do this.
Yeah. I mean, what is it? Did you say spite again? Spite is a powerful fuel when it comes to creativity.
Spite is a powerful motivator.
No, I must admit, and I think when you talk about again political intrigue, I do look at things like obviously there are like parts of like a faction system, particularly when the Waterdeep setting, they have like the whole sort of renown system, but there's not necessarily the groundwork to support it in the same way. They're just like, oh, if you do this, you get 1 renown, and it's like, okay, well, let's say I have 5 renown with this faction. Do I get like a button? Do I get like what does this kind of attribute it to? And sometimes the sort of like the social aspect of the thing often sometimes gets reduced down to just, I guess, just do a charisma check. And yeah, it's again, it would be interesting to see the way, like, again, the social pillar fleshed out in the same sense that the combat pillar is. No, it's interesting. So it is very much like, again, what you come across, and you again, I imagine you subscribe to the sort of the mindset of like, okay, well, if I'm struggling with this, or at my table and stuff like that, if I go through the effort of making something, chances are there's at least one other table out there that is probably going through the same thing I am.
Exactly.
No, interesting. No, so I guess as well, is there any so you mentioned as well, so was it for Chilling Tales of the Whispering Wind, you kind of mentioned that was a previous adventure that you kind of had written or just had sort of run with your sort of players before?
Yes. That was an anthology that I worked in, and one of the 2 adventures 2.5 adventures that I did write for it was something I had run for a group before. It was dropped into the middle of a larger campaign. Like, it was something I wrote in the middle of a larger campaign, and kind of realized after running it, I was like, yeah, I can sort of just carve this section of the campaign out and use it as a one-shot. Like, I could sell it as a one-shot. And it was fairly horror oriented, so when I was asked to do an anthology of horror adventures, that was what I dropped. I was like, hey, this is a horror adventure set in an Arctic climate, and that's kind of the theme we're going with, because it was around the time of Frost Maiden. So Arctic climates were all the jazz.
Yeah, all the rage. You said something. You said 2.5 adventures. Again, I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job if 2.5. What do you mean by 2.5 adventures?
So as writers, I was a writer and editor on that project. And as writers, we were all expected to put down two projects or two stories. And as an editor, I put a lot of work into getting that project to ship.
Mm-hmm.
But toward the end, we had a writer who dropped out.
Oh, okay.
Well, not dropped out entirely, but basically said like, "Hey, I don't have time to finish this. Like, I don't have time to ride this out." But I really liked the story they had written. So I talked with them and I was like, "Hey, I will go back and I will refine this and you can look it over. Like, I will keep your original creative idea.
Mm-hmm.
I just want this to make it into the final book."
Yeah.
And they said yes. So I basically went back and finished their story for them.
Wow.
And they liked it, so it stayed in the final book. So that's why I say I did 2.5. I had my 2, and then I picked up 1 from someone that wasn't able to finish the project.
No, again, I love things like that. Like hearing someone else's like pitch or idea that would otherwise be probably cut or replaced with something else, to be like, no, this is gonna be good, and just sort of like carrying the torch, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting as well. You kind of mentioned that so being an editor on that project. I noticed that obviously getting involved in like collaborations. Do you like to try and get involved in like a mix as like a writer and editor, or was it just for this particular project you were sort of jumping on as an editor?
Generally I try to, I mean, like that one in particular, I originally jumped on as a writer,
Mm-hmm.
and then the project lead asked if we had an editor, and I hadn't actually done any editing work for the DMsGuild at that point. I think my only product at that point was Shadow of Waterdeep, and I just said I've done editing in the past. Like I've done editing for like magazines and journals and more of the mainstream creative writing stuff in the past. So I was like, I could probably do it. Like, I'm fairly confident I could edit this.
Yeah.
And he just said, sure. Like, he adjusted my profit split and put me on as an editor and a writer.
Okay. So
yeah, generally that is, sorry.
So as I say, it's just, the way it kind of is for the DMsGuild is the fact that you kind of stumbled into it, and next thing you know.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Fair. It's like, yeah. No, I was curious. Again, I'm hugely I have huge respect for people who can wear those many hats. I do not feel at liberty or prepared to sort of say, yeah, no, I could probably edit someone else's work, just because I know the pain I put my own editors through. So it's more, like, again, it would be a sort of a type of like self-flatulence. Not
self-flatulence too. Self-flagellation.
Yeah, that's a poor choice of words. That's moving on swiftly.
You edit these.
Yeah, please. Moving on swiftly. There we go. Cool, calm, collected. Looking over again everything that you kind of do, then, is there like one part of a project that is kind of consistently like your favorite?
Oh, mechanics design, definitely.
Interesting. I mean, so like, what exactly is it about mechanics then?
It's always been a strength of my design. I really like the puzzle of it, I guess, is the best way to put it. Like, I like figuring out the logic of how to make this weird turning machine of systems work. And it feels really good when I do get a system down that I'm like, yes, this is elegant and I am happy with. Like, you've seen, Ari and I have gone back and forth in Steve's project for like months now, just discussing mechanics, because I am just thrilled to play with systems. I love, like, I have a system I'm building in my own time just as like a hobby project, because I have a ton of fun messing with it.
And
I love it.
I guess this kind of feeds into like what you were mentioning earlier about again trying to implement or I that's like I guess jerry rig the 5e system to kind of do what you want it to do.
Oh yeah.
I guess like this is are there any sort of mechanics you've done for 5e that you're particularly proud of?
Oh man.
And this, I feel like this is a little bit like trying to pick your favorite child.
Oh yeah. I've got one of my players play a very unique table of 5e to say the least, because they get to play with all my experimentation and weird stuff.
Yeah.
But one thing I did do that I really like, that I honestly, when I go back to tables without it, I feel like I'm missing something. I ditched Arcana, Nature, Religion, and History.
Oh, okay. I know you.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm on board. Sign me up.
Spicy right off the bat. Spicy right off the bat. I ditched all 4 of those skills and literally just replaced them with a skill called Knowledge.
Ooh.
And it's hard to explain in speech, but essentially, instead, when you take proficiency in Knowledge, you get a certain number of fields of knowledge to choose from based on your intelligence. And like Arcana, History, Nature, and Religion are all in there. But there's also like Mercantile and Martial and Planar and weird stuff like that. And because you take the 1 proficiency in Knowledge and get multiple fields, people can have more like esoteric and diverse kinds of knowledge without feeling like they're wasting their proficiencies. And that way you get characters who have all these like odd bits of information, like they can roll for like Mercantile to figure out if they're being scammed. And that's one that I think I've had a ton of success with in my games. My players universally love that. And I've been wanting to sort of write it up and make it into a product on the DMs Guild, but I have no idea how to market that.
Yeah, there definitely is a space for optional rules. But yeah, I guess I don't know. I think mine goes straight to sort of like a meme cover where you have the list of skills and you just have 7 like like religion, history. You just have those crossed out. I think that again, just hearing it, that kind of makes a lot of sense, because there are often times at tables where you have players like sometimes ask like, would my character know this, or or have any sort of information of this, and you're like, oh well, I guess you're proficient in religion, so I guess we can give it a go. But rewarding the player for having that sort of again choosing the knowledge proficiency, but also outlining what their strengths and weaknesses are. That seems like a really nice touch. I think sometimes as a DM, it is sometimes like, I guess like there are proficiencies that they have significant overlap. And sometimes it's trying to choose the right way to sort of reward them, particularly coming from where I'm coming from as like an adventure designer. I try my best to sort of make sure that every sort of proficiency has an opportunity to shine. And sometimes that's hard to do. Like again, you can't always just throw a bird in and be like, well, if you do an animal handling check for this bird, they'll give you a key. No, interesting. No, that sounds like a really cool system. And again, I would be fascinating to see the write-up of that in whatever shape it ends up taking.
Oh, don't worry. I'm sure it'll end up in an upcoming project.
I was gonna say, was it? Again, this may be. It sounds like it would fit in Tasha's Hideous Leftovers quite nicely.
I was actually going to put it in Tasha's Hideous Leftovers. I wish I had. I just couldn't think of a good way to. I don't know. I didn't feel confident in it. In retrospect, I wish I'd put it in there though.
Well, I guess Tasha's Hideous Leftovers 2.
Yeah. That book was already way bigger than it was supposed to be anyways. It didn't need more content.
Yeah. No, that's good.
It was going to be a 50-page book. It's like 130.
I must admit that's another thing for like, determining projects is knowing when to say no. And particularly in a project managerial role, it is sometimes easy to go, oh yeah, no, sure, we can cram that in. Yeah, we can fit fine. But you're like,
yep,
no, this is where we draw the line in the sand. Then, so to cycle back to my question then. Obviously, like what is your like favorite part? On the other side of the coin, is there like a part of the process that you don't necessarily enjoy? So if mechanics is like love it, I was about to say eat it all day, but yeah.
This is going to sound weird, but adventure writing. I hate writing adventures. Chilling Tales from the Whispering Wind was a unique situation because we wrote the adventures very differently.
Mm-hmm.
We were coming at it with a very narrative-centered viewpoint. But the way adventures are written and the way modules are written, I've never prepped that way. I've never prepped, you will go event 1, event 2, event 3, conclusion, etc. I always prep. The average prep sheet for me is a bunch of characters, a bunch of motivations, an inciting incident, 4 to 5 escalating events, and a bad ending. And the bad ending is what happens if the heroes never show up. Like, what happens if the heroes fail? And that's all the impetus. Like, that's what I prep. So having to take that very amorphous way that I prepare and cram it into this is a step-by-step guide to run this adventure breaks my mind. I cannot fathom it. I've been trying to write like CCCs and dungeon craft adventures for a while, and I just cannot do it. It is a definite weakness of mine.
No, I was gonna say, I think you're kind of touching on like a really good point there. Is the fact that it lends itself to like again the like questions of like game design as a whole. Is the fact that the sort of open world design approach, the sort of allow for a interesting situation where action is kind of emergent from just the setup, versus a very sort of tailored experience. And you kind of mentioned, like, you're right that there are almost like two ends of the spectrum where you have the sort of the adventure, dungeon craft and CCC content, where the ideal is that most people who come and sort of sit at the table will have a similar experience by playing through almost bit by bit. I feel like it kind of like, again, to bring the comparison of both, Dragon Heist and Mad Mage. Because the setup for Dragon Heist is again very similar. Like, there is a number of things that are going on in the city, and they kind of give you those sort of instigating events, and there is a little bit more of like a streamline to it. But no, it's challenging, and I think that it is the writing up an adventure that is essentially like, here are some interesting characters, here is the engaging setup. Is fantastic. The only problem is I guess for newer DMs, who don't necessarily don't have as much confidence in sort of being able to sort of say, oh yeah, we just sort of improv that bit, or the adventure goes where the adventure goes, and rely more on, like, I guess not a structure. Well, I guess something of a structure. Is why it's kind of muddies the water. Because I think you can go either way, and maybe there's a adventure template out there that sits in that happy medium, but I don't know if we found it yet.
Yeah, maybe not for 5e. As Joseph said, the best adventures are ones like a soup or a stew that you can season to taste, not like a ganache where you mess up one thing and it's ruined forever.
That's a fire quote.
Yeah, that was a great one. Joseph dropped that absolute wisdom on us in the DMsGuild chat some time ago. And I have not forgotten it since.
Yeah, I feel like that needs to be like an epitaph on like my grave.
Like somebody made a poster of it.
It's again that sort of like motivational thing. No, 100%. And I guess, like, do you still plan on writing adventures? Is it?
Well, I hope I still plan on writing adventures, because I agreed to write one for an upcoming Kickstarter project. And I'm gonna need to get on that.
Yeah. No,
If my project manager is listening, I promise I'll get it done.
Here's the thing. By the time that this is potentially released, you've already done it. Let's just say it like
sweet,
that.
sweet.
It's
Exactly.
No, I guess. So how did you find the process for if we take Chilling Tales, for example, then the prompt of the adventure that you kind of had, like, how did you find navigating that into a sort of more, again, I don't want to say traditional adventure format, but what were some of the things you did to try and take your ideal vision for what the adventure was and distill it into?
Well, the joy of Chilling Tales was that it was the format we were writing in was one that I liked. Rather than writing a strict progression of events, we wrote a location, like a bunch of locations, a bunch of characters, an inciting event, a villain, and then we did a clock system where it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and every stage of the clock escalated the tension. And that worked great for me. I loved writing in that system. I loved writing in that structure because that's how I plan and that's how I prep. So for me, Chilling Tales came naturally. Like, I had my stories done very early in the production of Chilling Tales. Part of why I picked up the editor duties is because writing didn't take me very long, so I had plenty of free time.
I must say that's another thing I kind of find is sometimes, like, in writing those sort of like timeline based adventures or murder mysteries in particular.
Murder mysteries.
It is very easy for you to sort of like get lost in word count of like just trying to describe what happens bit by bit, because you almost feel the need to prescribe every, like, to try and get, like, if you give the motivations, then you potentially have nothing but like, oh, okay, in the event of this person could do this person could do this person could do this, and then you kind of it's I guess it's the challenge of balancing the two, or to sort of give enough character information that the DM can be like, oh, I kind of get this person's gist that they would do X or Y. No, fantastic. Again, being a adventure writer, I'm again, any chance to kind of chat about them, I kind of take it. I'll be honest, I'm selfish.
Of course.
Yeah, no, it's my go-to for backers. I mean, it is my podcast. I'm allowed. Then, I guess to summarize your like creative process as a whole, then, is there like a particular lesson that you've learned over everything you've been doing that you wish you'd learned just a little bit sooner?
Hire an editor.
Yeah, there we go. The catchphrase.
Yeah, they're worth the cost. I didn't hire an editor for Shadow of Waterdeep because I didn't think anybody would be interested in it. I didn't think anybody would want to jump on this project. I didn't really believe in it. And now I go back through Shadow of Waterdeep, like when I'm using it for my own game, I go back and every time I open it, like clockwork, there's a typo.
In fairness, I think again, for anyone's like first publication on the DMsGuild, I think you are allowed like a free get out of jail free card for not using editor. I think it's just it's like it's a rite of passage. I think, like, again, the people out there who are like, I want to publish on the DMsGuild, and they go out, they get an editor, they get a layout artist. More props to them. But I was very much of the sort of like bumbling in blind and
yep. Same.
Yeah, I would argue I was humbled by the trial of fire that I willingly stepped into. No, interesting. I guess anything on a so aside from hiring an editor, is there any, I guess, more like technical things, or I guess like more design related things?
On the technical front, I don't know. I don't feel that there was. I think a lot of the things that I learned from on the technical front, I learned from collaborating with other people. I learned from having my work edited. I learned from other people reading my work. And that's just it. It's beyond hiring an editor, like even just having one other person read over your work once, even if they're not an editor, even if they don't really do design, just a second set of eyes helps a lot.
Yeah.
Because I would say almost everything I've learned since coming into this community, I have learned by circumstance because somebody else pointed it out in my work.
Yeah, I must admit, I always feel like I should sometimes pay royalties to like my first ever editor, because the amount of times where before I'm about to send a project off to the editor, I'm just like, no, I need to look for what is it? Wills and cans. I need to do a control F for wills and cans, like because they told me off for doing it. And it's I wouldn't know that if it wasn't for the someone to sort of who sat me down and told me that. And yeah. Yeah, that's it's a lovely thing about this community to kind of see the sort of, I guess, teachings that you kind of get, that you kind of as you go along. There's like people who particularly point you in the right direction, and I don't know why it feels like it's. I was about to say, like, as you publish next thing, it's almost like you've got like all the Force ghosts of everyone you've ever worked with in the background. Not that they're dead.
Very much.
Just in spirit. There you go. There you go. So I guess looking to the future then, do you have a particular like dream project that you'd love to sort of I guess work on? I mean, obviously you mentioned the the knowledge system as a potential one to kind of work on in the future, but I guess you also mentioned having a potentially your own system.
Yes. I think that if I had to pick a dream project, that'd be it. It is urban fantasy, which is a genre I am just in love with. I just love the feel of like something in the vein of like Stranger Things. This like a normal place becomes alien. Magic infiltrates the lives of ordinary people. It's this project I've been working on. The working title is Alleyway Arcana. And I've always wanted to like, yeah, I'm gonna finish writing this up. I'm gonna do all the mechanics. I'm gonna finish writing the narrative, and I'm gonna pull a team together, and we're gonna kickstart this.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I discovered through Tasha's Hideous Leftovers that I am not a project manager, so that could be difficult. But yeah, I'm hoping the practice that I'm getting through doing like Kickstarters with other people, like what we've got going on currently and such. I'm hoping through that to be a little more comfortable and confident in my abilities, because I do really one day want to make a like fiction first urban fantasy system for running those kinds of games. I love the idea of magic infiltrating urban spaces.
Yeah, and I must admit, I don't think it is a genre that is played around with quite enough. I think it kind of always goes like one way or another into like alternate reality, or somewhere off like. But yeah, no, again,
or you just make Vampire the Masquerade again.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, I know, yeah. But sometimes you want an escape from all the sexy vampires.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, again, I 9 to 5 every day where like there's just stupid sexy vampires, and sometimes it's nice to be able to clock out and not have to worry about anyone going close to my neck. No, awesome. And yeah, I think the interesting thing is it's like collaborating on like a Kickstarter project, or a project of a particular type, I think is one of the best ways to kind of prepare yourself from going through that yourself. You get to watch the project manager of like a Kickstarter project go through, especially the 7 stages of grief, or 5 stages. But no, again, it's just you learn by being witnessing and being involved in the process.
Exactly.
And again, Kickstarter seems to be a growing trend among this sort of tabletop RPG space. In particular, again, I don't know why. It just seems everyone's doing it. It's hot. It's a new trend. So I guess then, to keep it kind of talking about like collaborations and everything. Then, is there anyone particularly in the DMsGuild or surrounding community that kind of particularly inspires you?
Well, definitely ERF Jordan, because they are absolutely superhuman.
Yeah.
Just the amount of work they were punching out when I first came into the community, I was like, oh my god, how do you do this? And all their new collaborations.
Yeah.
Definitely really look up to them. They helped me get involved in the community when I first arrived, and were really helpful in like finding my footing here. And Isaac May, I cannot sing his praises enough. He gave me my first chance when I showed up, like the first project I ever worked on, like group project. He gave me, he backed me up throughout it. He made sure that like I was supported throughout. He has been mentoring me since. Like when I was project managing for Hideous Leftovers, he was like telling me how to do it, giving me all this advice, helping me out every step of the way. Cannot sing his praises enough. Isaac May.
No,
man has mentored me more than most people's patience would ever allow someone to.
Yeah, no, it's funny actually hearing that, because like similar story to that is like I think Isaac May was the second collaboration I was actually ever involved in. He kind of took a chance on me to kind of write an adventure for him. And yeah, again, the Isaac May and the Mays as like a collective, they're fantastic people. No, again, that's lovely. And yeah, if ERF Jordan ever reveals their secret about how they're such a powerhouse, I feel like that's got to be, it's got to be a phylactery. It's got not to accuse people of being liches. I'm just saying there's got to be something going on there. No, well, again, fantastic. And then, well, I guess like we've kind of like alluded to bits and bobs of some of the stuff that you're kind of working on. But yeah, if you don't mind kind of chatting about like what are some of the things that you're working on at the moment, and kind of what can we expect, in the future?
Well, currently, most likely dropping in January, will be Weird Artifacts from the Guild, which I'm working on. That's the one that Isaac May pulled me on. And it's his upcoming project where we designed 100 world-defining and campaign-defining artifacts.
Yeah, that's such a cool project.
Yeah, it was awesome. I had so much fun with it. I'm working on the advanced 5e system, which is releasing as a Kickstarter through Endsider sometime early 2021. I don't know to what degree I'm allowed to talk about Steve's project.
Yeah, what was it? So that's Steve Pankatai?
Yeah.
They have a project that is in the works.
I can like talk about it a little bit, and I'll ask him, and if it turns out I can't talk about it, we can just cut this.
What is it? We'll do it this way. Where what's that? I'll bring Steve on. I've been meaning to chat to him anyway, so I'll bring him on, and then he'll have the opportunity to chat about it when things get closer to the time and stuff like that. That way we don't accidentally NDA ourselves.
Okay, so pass on that.
Yeah.
There's also through Transparent Games, we're going to be launching a Kickstarter for What a Lovely Adventure, an anthology of romantic and Valentine's themed queer adventures.
I'm actually involved in that one.
Oh yeah, you're on that one as well.
Yeah.
We bumped into each other an awful lot.
Yeah.
And I'm also working with Andrew Welker with QL Games, who produced Tasha's Crucible. And we are doing a group patrons for Waterdeep, where I am going to be using the rules in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything Else, or Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, to make group patrons for Waterdeep, and I am handling Skullport patrons. So
I want it's as I say, you drew the short straw. I imagine I imagine that. No, I can't imagine anyone better equipped to write about Skullport.
I am the undisputed Queen of Skulls.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And again, I hate to say it, but yeah, I think I'm also involved in that factions project.
Yes, you are. You most certainly are.
So yeah, they say the world is small, and this is only just further evidence to that.
No,
but yeah,
into the audience, because you know exactly what I'm involved in there.
But no, 100%. And yeah. So again, what's great is the fact that as soon as they are out, the people listening will know, and they'll be able to support support us together. They've heard us chat, and they can be like, oh yeah, this is something that these people I've heard chat for an hour.
Quarter one of 2021 going to be a big time for both of us.
Yeah, busy. And fairness, that's the weird thing about collaborations that always gets me off guard is the fact that like how sometimes stilted things are. And again, the sort of solo projects, I'm so used to like instant gratification. At the moment I have to wait, I'm just like, oh, I can't. I need to release something now.
Oh yeah.
Nice. Well, again, Cassandra, thank you so much for again taking some time out of your day to sit down and have this chat. Again, if people are curious about hearing about all this, where is the best place for them to hear them? Get news about your work.
Well, most of the news about my work comes through my Twitter at the Ice Queer, all one word. That is the primary place I share about it. Yeah, don't much use Facebook for obvious reasons.
No.
And the bulk of my work makes its way onto the DMsGuild. I think that is the bulk of my social media.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I say, it's good to be easy to find, and yeah, we'll have your Twitter handle and links to your DMsGuild profile in the link and stuff below. Well, fantastic, yeah, and I guess I've been Matthew Whitby. Yeah, you can find me at Whitby Writes. I will have some things coming out soon. Again, probably. I'm always really bad at judging when things I'm making are going to come out. Maybe not by the time of this one, but soon, TM. I think I've said this at the end of the last 5 to 6 podcasts. But honestly,
time to make that mashup.
Yeah. Basically, this is when people realize that I haven't done any work, and this is me. this is me just putting on a front. But until people work that out, I will maintain the illusion. Again, thank you so much for joining me. And I guess my final question then is, how do you end a podcast?
How do you end a podcast? How?